Hello. Welcome to North Country History with Rob Berg. I'm Rob, and this is the beginning of Season 3 of the podcast. Today, in honor of Black History Month, I'm going to introduce to you Frank W. May, From Slavery to Lumberman. He was a unique person in Michigan's lumber history of the 19th and early 20th century. So sit back, settle in, and enjoy the show. North Country History with Rob Berg, your podcast on the forest history of the Great Lakes region. So here we are, belatedly beginning Season 3 of the podcast. For those of you who are not aware, I had to take a little bit of a hiatus due to, at the beginning of December, my mother became ill, and then sadly on December 21st, 4 days before Christmas, she passed away. Shirley Berg was a great woman. She and my dad, Vince Berg, they were married for almost 63 years, raised 6 children, me being the youngest, and she passed away at the age of 93 after a great life. And I would love to talk about her here on the podcast, but it's really outside the scope of it. But she was really, one of my great cheerleaders, especially with the podcast, restarting, reinvigorating my history career that I had to kind of put aside to help her out in the last few years of her life. But so I'm back, starting here today, and it's not going to be an every week thing right now for the podcast, unfortunately. I'm a little back behind in recording. I've got to do some interviews, so I'm going to try to put out 2 to 3 a month until I kind of get back on schedule. I will do my full Season 3. It's just going to be a little bit longer than what I've done in the past. But it is Black History Month, February is, and I had this particular episode in mind, and we're actually doing it on the day that I had originally planned to do it, releasing it on February 9th. I came across Frank May sometime around 2015. I don't exactly remember how he was brought to my attention. I think I saw an article about him in passing while I was looking for something else, tying in the Detroit or tying in Detroit's lumber markets into the lumbering in the logging of the white pine in Michigan. And he came across as a very unique figure. He was an African American who owned his own sawmill in Detroit. And with his unique background, having been born and raised a slave in the South prior to the Civil War and during the Civil War. So I kind of set out on a quest to find out more about Mr. May. And thankfully, the Detroit Public Library's Burton Historical Collection actually had a file on Frank May. So I spent some time in the summer of 2016 doing some research on him, coming down from the Grayling area where I was still living, staying here with my parents in Chelsea, and then driving into Detroit over a 2-day process to do some research. And the outcome of that was an article that I had published in the Chronicle, which is the members' magazine of the Historical Society of Michigan. I'd hoped to have it published in Michigan History Magazine, their statewide public magazine, but they deemed it was more fitting for the Chronicle, and I appreciated that they bought my article. Yes, I got paid for it. So it came out in the summer of 2017, volume 40, number 2. So you can find it, and I'll put the information in the podcast notes that you can check it out. So I wrote this article on Frank May. It was titled Frank W. May's Spirit of Enterprise. And I'm going to read this article for you. I'm going to try not to make it sound boring. I will interject with my own personal views here outside of what I wrote here throughout, and kind of tying it into the history to what was going on during that period. But so I thought, I've already written the words. I've done the research. I'm not going to rehash all of that and reinvent the wheel of something that I've already done. So I'm going to read the article to you. And so just, as you're listening to it, you can think about, what Mr. May had to go through in his life to being born not a citizen here in the United States of America, and being enslaved, being property of other people. And he was born into slavery. His parents were slaves. He was sold off as a child and was separated from his family. And he was able to get back with his mother, and then he went off on his own as a free man after being emancipated, and rose to the top level of what he could as an African American here in the United States, here in Michigan in the 19th century. So here we go. Frank W. May's Spirit of Enterprise. Detroit lumberman Frank W. May was unlike most Michigan lumbermen. He was not a native-born Michigander, nor did he follow the lumber industry to Michigan from points east. He was not an immigrant from Europe. In fact, May was born into slavery in the South and was one of the few African-American men to own and operate a lumber business in Michigan during the late 19th century. African Americans were not uncommon in Michigan's lumber industry. I know for a fact of a couple of logging camps that employed African Americans in Michigan. There's photographic evidence of two that I have found. One is Belding's Camp in Emmett County, up in Bliss Township. This would have been probably sometime in the 1880s, 1890s by the looks of the photo. I don't own or have a copy of that photo now, but we had it at Hartwick Pine State Park at the Logging Museum, and it came from the State of Michigan Archives. Also a photograph that the one used for my podcast in my Facebook and Instagram postings of this shows a logging operation somewhere in the Grayling area and showing one African-American logger out there. So I know there's at least those two, and there's probably more. Many lumber towns employed African-American laborers who tended to be unskilled workmen or timber cutters. According to the 1915 Michigan Manual of Freedmen's Progress, in 1910, there were more than 91,000 African Americans working as laborers in sawmills and another 14,000 working in the woods throughout the United States. It was more likely to find African Americans working in the sawmills. They lived in segregated communities in places like Muskegon, Bay City, Saginaw, and other lumber towns here in Michigan, and across the Great Lakes in Wisconsin, Minnesota, probably in Ontario. Of course, they were Canadian or African Canadians there. So it was not uncommon to find them working in the mills as opposed to out in the forest where they would not have been able to live segregated. Frank W. May, however, was not among those workers. On the contrary, he was one of the few African-American men on record to have owned his own mill and timber operations in Michigan. Frank May was born on July 27, 1854, in Meade County, Kentucky, to Frank May and Rhoda Weathers, both of whom were enslaved. In 1861, when he was 7 years old, May was sold to a cotton plantation in Louisiana and remained there for 1 year before the entire plantation was moved to Texas during the Civil War. May was unaware of his emancipation until 1866, when government agents came to the plantation informing the formerly enslaved people that they were free and could go wherever they pleased. Juneteenth is recognized as when slaves in Texas, at least in Galveston, Texas, were aware learned of their emancipation. And that was in June of 1865, 2 months after the end of the Civil War. But some of them did not learn of it that soon. In fact, here, like Frank May, not until a year later. Instead of leaving the plantation, the freedmen continued to work on contract, except for May, whose ex-master received a letter from May's mother instructing him to keep 12-year-old May and return him to Kentucky when traveling north. However, May was rebuffed by the man whenever he brought up going home. After a year, May took his leave and went to work for another man for $8 a month. After 11 months of working and only receiving $12 for clothing, May cut his losses and moved to Mississippi. There he found good employment for $5 a month and an additional $45 at Christmas. With that money, May was able to return to Kentucky, where he found his mother still living on the old farm where they had once lived together. Because his mother was unable to provide for him, May pushed on to Louisville and found employment in the streetcar barns. Though he was more suited to working and living on a farm than in the city, he kept at the job for 3 years until he found a job working in car shops with the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. A year into the job, May was injured when his hand was crushed by rail yard equipment. His disability limited his employment options in Louisville, so he headed farther north to Detroit and found work as a teamster. Just as a reminder, teamsters were those who drove the teams of horses. Truck drivers, the Teamster Union kind of came out of that with the birth of the automobile. May was first listed in the Detroit City directories in 1881 as a teamster for J&T Hurley Coal, Wood, and Sewer Pipe. They built sewer pipes out of wood at that time, so this was a woodworking lumber manufacturing firm. He worked for the Hurley brothers until 1882, when he took a job as a teamster for the Detroit Wooden Ware Works. He worked there for a year before switching to the Craddock Brothers car roofing and siding manufacturers on Vinewood Avenue and the Grand Trunk Railroad on Detroit's southwest side. These were what Detroit did with the lumber coming from the northern part of the state, is they manufactured items out of lumber. The Craddock brothers provided materials for the construction of railroad cars, a major industry in Detroit before it became known for its automobiles. It was with the Craddock brothers that Frank W. May learned the skills of inspecting and grading lumber. By 1886, May was listed as a lumber inspector. His time as an independent lumber inspector must have been short-lived, since he was only listed as a sawyer, a skilled position that operated a steam-powered saw inside a sawmill, in 1887 and 88. Though there is no record of May owning his own mill before 1889, he was already dealing in wood products that were cast off from other sawmills by that time. May believed that coarse variations of hardwood lumber could be cut to certain sizes and used by furniture manufacturers to build table legs, spindles, grillwork, and banisters in the styles of the popular Queen Anne and other ornate Victorian architecture. He went into the business of dealing lower-grade hardwood and pine, finally opening his own sawmill at 994 Scotton Avenue in southwest Detroit in 1889. May dealt mostly in coarse grades from other mills, but he soon realized the need for his own stock of saw logs. An article about May's sawmill appeared in the May 5, 1892 issue of the Detroit Evening News, offering a good overview of the business. Manufacturer of oak squares and dimension for chair and table products, and dealer in hardwood for fuel, 990, 992, and 994 Scotton Avenue. This industry was established on January 1, 1890 by the present proprietor, and had been developed into a grand success and takes peculiar prominence from the remarkable inventive genius of Mr. Frank W. May, who is the moving spirit of the enterprise. The writer for the Detroit Evening News was a little alliterative, wasn't he? The facilities for manufacturing are of the latest and most improved character and include a special machine of Mr. May's invention for making telegraph pins and brackets with a daily capacity of 12,000, saving the work of 5 men. Hands to the number of 25 are employed, whose weekly wages amount to $150. The trade embraces eastern and northern sections, but the major part of it is confined to the local demand. By 1893, May had expanded his mill by adding both a gang saw and a bandsaw. He employed 25 men, and his output reached roughly 3 million board feet a year. That number was small when compared to bigger mills in Saginaw, Bay City, Muskegon, and other pine lumber centers, but May was conducting a large operation for his type of work. He was doing piecework, really. So he was not a big operator in the lumber industry, but he took his opportunity where available. He basically, as a teamster hauling, scrap lumber at the sawmills, he found an opportunity to salvage and kind of reclaim a lot of this and make some money out of it, and that came into becoming his own business, his own industry. May also added winter logging operations to his business by employing 40 workmen to cut oak and pine in Otsego County, where he had purchased a tract of timberland. So he wasn't only a sawmill operator, he also was a lumberman that owned his own cutting operation. That was something, that was a big deal, especially for an African-American man at that time. That same year, this would have been 1893, May and his family moved into a home at 1145 Vinewood Avenue in Detroit. He had married Ida Robinson in Grosse Pointe on June 30, 1885, and they went on to have 2 children, daughters Grace, born in 1886, and Florence, born in 1888. According to the 1900 U.S. Census, the Mays were the only African-American family living in an otherwise white neighborhood, now part of Mexican Town, and were among the few African-American families to own their own homes in Detroit. As May's business operations continued to grow, he expanded his dealings beyond Detroit to other parts of Michigan, Ohio, and farther east. He also added a planing mill along with the gang saw and band mill. May continued in business until 1905 when he sold his mill and went to work as a timber cruiser. That year, the family moved to a home at 354 Meldrum Avenue, south of Jefferson Avenue and near the Detroit River. After May finally retired from the lumber industry in 1907, they again moved, this time to 1372 Parker Avenue on Detroit's east side. May died at the age of 55 on December 4, 1909, leaving an estate worth $50,000, which would amount to more than $1.27 million today. Now, I wrote this in 2016, 2017, so that could have changed a little bit now, 10 years later. May is buried at Detroit's Woodmere Cemetery. He was survived by his wife Ida and their 2 daughters. After her husband's death, Ida managed their considerable estate and farm, which provided an upper middle class upbringing for her children and grandchildren. It didn't make the cut in the article. I had to edit for space, but they also owned a farm out around Belleville, Michigan, in western Wayne County. So they not only had the home in Detroit, they also had a farm, a working farm in rural Wayne County. Now it's all pretty suburban there, but so they had some money. They were not living at a poverty level or working class. They would have been probably considered upper middle class to upper class for their time period. Frank W. May was just one of many faces to appear in an industry that was valued at an estimated $4 billion. Again, I wrote this in 2017. I've learned since that it was more like $2.5 billion here in Michigan alone, $4 billion overall in the Great Lakes states. If judging by the size of his business operations, his story is just a footnote in the history of Michigan's lumber period. However, it is an important story to preserve and share, for May was living proof of that nearly anyone with determination and talent could succeed in the booming lumber industry of the 19th century. In an era where lumber was king, it was the men and women from all walks of life who made Michigan the leader of that important industry for several decades. So, in a nutshell, Frank May was very unique. I mean, he rose from, the lowest of the low, being considered property of another individual because of his skin color. and overcame, being an enslaved person, and worked his way up, starting, basically working, in the car barns in Louisville, Kentucky for the streetcars, because the original streetcars were being pulled by horses. So working in the car barns meant he was, cleaning out stalls. He was exercising horses. And then he went to work in the car shops of a railroad, the Louisville-Nashville Railroad, and injured his hand, probably getting caught coupling or uncoupling a railroad car. I mean, don't know what it did to his hand. Was it permanent disability or just strictly injured for the time and couldn't, had to adapt to using it in another way. But then he became a teamster, driving horses, having worked on a cotton plantation. And although, you'd think that picking cotton, backbending work, but he probably, got a chance to work with horses, learning that, and then being around horses in the car barns at the Louisville streetcar. He learned how to work as a teamster, and teamsters were decently paid individuals, and he became a timber grader, determining the quality of the lumber that was being cut, and that determined what they could be used for. So that was an important job. And becoming a sawyer. A sawyer in the forest was pulling on the crosscut saw, not exactly a skilled labor. But a sawyer in the sawmill was one of the top men in the sawmill. They operated that saw, and it was a very important job, and it was a well-paying job too. I suspect as a black man in the 19th century, he was getting paid a lot less than a white sawyer, but still, it came with a lot of responsibility and prestige. And all of that catapulted him to recognizing, I'm sure the timber grading, saw that a lot of good lumber was being turned to waste because they were small parts, not, usable for that type of work that they were doing in that mill. But he could, sell it off to others for use, particularly in the home building, using as, work for railings and banisters, spindles, used in interior work in home building in the ornate Victorian homes that were being built in Detroit and elsewhere at the time. And that led then to his own ownership and operation of a sawmill. And because he needed to have a good supply of lumber, yes, he could buy it on contract from others, but that was going to cost more money than the opportunity was to cut his own. So he was able to buy land, at least not necessarily, outright ownership of land, but at least to have the lumber rights, the timber rights on land in northern Michigan, Otsego County, right near Gaylord and Lake Otsego, or Otsego Lake, as it in northern Michigan, right on a railroad line, so it was easy to ship back to Detroit, and that propelled his business. And $50,000 estate that he left in 1909, $1.27 million in 2016, 2017 dollars. That was pretty impressive at the time period for a man of any race. And people like Frank May need to be remembered. And yes, I'm coming from a completely different background than Frank May did. I'm a white man in my 50s, living a comfortable life for the most part, my entire life, being, brought up by my family, by my parents for, my up into adulthood. Frank May didn't have that opportunity. So I can't really understand personally of what it was like for him, but I can, sense, the accomplishment that he did. And this is why, we remember on, Black History Month, people complain, oh, they get a month. What about for the rest of us? And it's like, well, yeah, we get 12 months a year. So we need to recognize the accomplishment of others that we don't normally think about, or what history didn't normally record. So hopefully, this gave you a little bit into the understanding of the accomplishments of others. And I mean, look around you this entire month, but all year round, of what others have done. Just because you weren't, didn't come up through the same, difficulties that they did, that doesn't mean that you can't learn a little bit from their experiences. And, it's important, especially this time in history here currently in the United States, where others want to kind of forget what people of different races, different colors, different genders have had to go through. And instead of erasing history like is happening right now throughout the country, I mean, the National Park Service has been forced to take down interpretive panels, signage, cover exhibits, or remove them that commemorate this other history that has happened in the United States. So please remember the people like Frank W. May and others. Martin Luther King Jr. Day was last month, and that was really downplayed in our country. And just support what others have done in this country. And I'm getting off my political soapbox now, and just wanted to thank you all for sticking with me through this time that I've had to take a hiatus. I just noticed a couple days ago that I've had a nice increase in listenership this week, even though I haven't had any new material since Christmas Day. So thanks for being a part of this podcast and supporting me, and listening to it, sharing it with others. As I've always said, the best way to pass the word on the podcast is tell a friend, and give them a chance to listen to it. And I know not everybody's going to enjoy what I post here or what I share here, and that's fine. But if you do like it, let somebody else know who you think might like it as well. And you can go to the direct website for it, North Country History with Rob Berg.buzzsprout.com. And on that page, if you really like it, click the support button, and for as little as $3 a month, you can help support this page. And I want to expand it more this year. I'm going to go on another podcast tour in September. I'm going to hit Ontario. I've always wanted to include Canada as part of the North Country History experience here. And this will be my first chance to really do that, because the Great Lakes is not just Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, but it is also Ontario, Canada. And so we'll be exploring that history this year as well. Not right away on recorded podcasts. I got a backlog I got to get through because of everything I did in Wisconsin and Minnesota last summer that has yet to hit the airwaves. So we'll be doing that here soon. And the original schedule, which had me starting in January 5th, I was going to be doing some Minnesota and Wisconsin already, and I'll get to those. But I'm also doing a series here, I say a series, 4 episodes on the Pigeon River Country State Forest in northern Michigan, up in Otsego County, as mentioned with Frank May, along with a little bit of Montmorency County, but mostly Otsego and Sheboygan County. And big news happened just a couple of months ago in early December with the Pigeon River Country State Forest. It's a wordful, so most people just call it the Pigeon River Country, or PRC. And with a a significant addition to the land, to the area of it. So we'll be talking about that here soon in an episode on the Pigeon River country, the Big Wild, as its nickname is. And we'll get into all of that here soon. So that may be next week. It might be the week later. I don't know on that yet. But originally, the next episode, which was going to be on President's Day, was going to be about a visit to the Pigeon River country by Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter. After his presidency, he went on a hunting trip there, and we will talk about that. It's just not going to fall on President's Day, unfortunately. It'll be a little bit further down the line. So thank you again for listening, supporting me if you can, and stay tuned for the next episode coming up soon. Thank you. Have a great day, and I'll be here again soon. Bye. North Country History with Rob Berg is hosted, written, and produced by Rob Berg. Music is Crack o' Dawn, performed by Reveille, licensed through Soundstripe. Follow North Country History with Rob Berg on YouTube and on Facebook at Rob Berg, Environmental Historian.